Welcome to another of our Wednesday yachting luncheons. It couldn't be prettier outside the windows of the St. Francis Yacht Club. And right off the bat, we want to welcome our always traveling Commodore back from Tinsley Island. Come and talk to us about the Yacht Club, Commodore Paul Heineken.
Welcome everyone to another wonderful Yachtsman's Lunch that Ron keeps putting on, one thing better than the next week. Last week we had Stan Honey telling us about the Transpac, which was very illuminating. And this week we're going to go back to our wonderful bay and delta. And Ron will give the official introductions, but I just have to throw my own personal piece, because probably 5 years ago I got talked into a Yachtsman's Lunch here on climate change and public health with my medical background. And in fact, I spent probably half of it on the health of the Delta because we have a very unique resource, unstable resource up there, and we have to take care of it. And so I'm delighted that Kathy and Don are here today to talk about it.
Great, thank you, Commodore. A little bit about future speakers. You've maybe heard of Michael Ellis, the noted naturalist. He'll be here in December to talk all about his footloose and fancy-free forays into nature land. And he'll be talking about the Mojave Desert, which once was a lake. And that's a fun story. Also, later on this year, we want you to come by and listen to Michael Brodsky, who is the lawyer working for Save the Delta Alliance, the California Delta Alliance. We cannot speak enough about the potential danger of tunnels and whatnot to hurt our delta, so we're going to listen to what he has to say on this subject. You've heard of the Delta Ditch Run. How many people have raced one way to the Delta? Exactly. The Delta Ditch Run is a one-way race, kind of downwind, where you jibe only 100 and something times. And we're going to hear another view of how silly and thus fun the Delta Ditch Run is with Aaron Wickenham, who will be giving his presentation. You'll also come by in September to listen to Mort Beebe talk about his most recent his trip and his photographic essays in China. Susan Rooney, Graham Beale will be here in September to talk all about the Big Boat series. Brandon South will be here to talk all about ship strikes hurting whales, and we need to learn a little bit more about that because they're constantly happening at an accelerating rate, actually. Chip Merlin will be here to talk about racing in the Transpac in the yacht Merlin. He took third in class in that famous yacht. He's got stories. Leslie Compton will be here to talk about a beautiful book she wrote about Teddy Roosevelt and the great American Navy that went down to the Philippines and that whole adventure and how that changed Teddy Roosevelt actually for life. The San Francisco bar pilots are going to send Alan Garfunkel in August to talk all about how to become a bar pilot, what they do, and do you know if they still jump from the boat to the ship? Who knows? Think about that. You're at sea. It's usually foggy. It's kind of crazy out there. And you're on this little 80-foot boat next to a giant ship. So he'll tell you all about the dangers and the fun of that. Now a little bit about our speakers today. So when I first was a little kid in '57, I went up to the Delta for the first time. There were not very many boats up there. There certainly weren't ski boats that we kind of now know to proliferate throughout the Delta. It was this sort of like backwater location. And our speakers today are custodians of that incredible resource, which now, as we're seeing it in danger, more and more people are beginning to value. Kathy first remembers being on a sailboat when she was a little 6-year-old, and she was on a dinghy. When she got at age 11, sailing around with her dad in Santa Barbara, they thought, oh, this is a beautiful thing. You're out in boats in Santa Barbara. What could be prettier than that? In '65, she spent time in her 2-foot powerboat with relatives in Long Beach. And in 1980, she was sailing around, you know, out of Thousand Oaks. And then in 97, she moved up to the Delta, and right away heard all about the tunnels and the past peripheral canals and the other threats to have water detour around San Francisco Bay, to be caught in the river above and shipped to Southern California, bypassing San Francisco Bay. And she began to get concerned about it. She basically became a supervisor and was motivated partly by what could happen inside of her own county, San Joaquin County, in which we have an island called Tinsley. So we're about to meet the county supervisor whose turf is our Tinsley Island. She'll be joined by Don Nottoli, who remembers being in fishing boats at age 5 in Silver Lake and fishing with his folks up in the Northern California environs. And then at age 10, taking a ferry boat ride around Alcatraz, thinking that was pretty cool. And as he became a member of, as he grew up in the Delta, he was always aware of the peripheral canals. Now, the peripheral canals were essentially means by which we would take the water which nature has normally flown from the mountains through San Francisco Bay out into the ocean, and recognizes that if you start grabbing some of the water that's been cleansing San Francisco Bay for all these years and bypassing the bay, that is to say skipping past it and sending it to Southern California, that'll have a not only disastrous impact on the Delta, but it'll affect San Francisco Bay. And all the counties in what's called the Bay Area share this threat. So I don't think we could find more authoritative folks who can feel it and tell us factually what's going on with our Delta and the threats that we're still under. The 2 canals got stopped. They'll tell us about that, but there still are threats. So please welcome Kathy Miller and Don Nottoli. Come on up, guys.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having us here today. It's a pleasure. This is so beautiful, and the scenery just couldn't be more lovely. And what a day for it. So thank you very much. It's a real treat for us. Temperature did drop about 30 degrees when we got out of the car from where we came from, but it actually feels pretty good. We've been topping 100 for the last week. So it really felt nice to have a breeze and have the temperature drop a bit. So by way of background, I'm a small business owner. I'm an interior designer by trade. Had my own design studio, my husband and I. After I grew up in Southern California, we spent about 20 years in Seattle and then moved to Northern California to Stockton in '97. And my husband is now retired, but a bank executive. And so I had an interior design firm in Stockton. And when our youngest was getting ready to go to college, I decided to change gears a little bit. And I took a position as the executive director for the Downtown Property-Based Improvement District. So I worked really closely with business owners and property owners in Stockton on revitalizing our city. And in 2008, I had a pretty strong sense that our city, Stockton, wasn't being managed very well financially, and I ran for the city council. And our finances went into a free fall within 90 days, and Stockton, unfortunately, at the time, became the largest municipal bankruptcy in the history of the United States. So that was my cleanup job. I was like a hazmat officer, basically a financial hazmat officer. And so I stuck with the city council until we were poised to emerge from bankruptcy, still one of the fastest municipalities to emerge. And 2 years ago, just 5 short years out of coming out of bankruptcy, Stockton was ranked the 2nd most fiscally healthy city in the United States. So, yeah, thank you. Lot of tough decisions that had to be made, but in 2014, I ran for the Board of Supervisors, mainly to sort of take the work that I'd done with Stockton, kind of take it to the next level. Supervisors do a very different job than city council people do. And I felt like it was time. I had taken the lead for the city on water issues, And this was a perfect opportunity for me to sort of take that to another level. So I'm really happy to be here with you, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Don Nottoli.
Thanks, Kathy. Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Ron, for the very kind introduction, and certainly to the St. Francis Yacht Club for the invitation today. This is my first visit here, and I had a chance to converse at lunch with Paul and Bill and others, and what a great opportunity, certainly for the two of us, to be able to share with you this afternoon, some things about the Delta, certainly talk a little bit about the twin tunnels, but also I think as Ron prefaced, a little better? Okay. As Ron prefaced it, obviously some of the ongoing issues as it relates to the Delta and certainly to the Bay, because we are inextricably linked by nature, and I think obviously as the Delta goes, obviously the Bay potentially as well. Just by way of background, I know that Ron shared a little bit about our early boating experience, but my path to local government was a little bit different. I had the good fortune of right out of college of joining my predecessor on the board, Toby Johnson, who served on the Board of Supervisors in Sacramento County for 16 years. And the district that he represented, that I now represent, includes the Sacramento portion of the Delta. So from Freeport, the Gateway, all the way down to the Antioch Bridge in the Sacramento County portion, including the lower islands. And so I had an opportunity for 16 years prior to my election in 1994 to certainly come to know better the people of the Delta, and certainly to understand some of the issues then, obviously, that certainly have a very strong connection to now. I'm in my 25th year on the Board of Supervisors, my 7th term, and it's been, again, my good fortune over the years to have had the opportunity, certainly on behalf of the people of Sacramento County, but certainly those in the Delta and the district that I immediately represent, which includes from the Antioch Bridge to Rancho Cordova on the east. And as I was talking with Bill at lunch, I hail from the town of Galt. I'm born and raised a native Sacramentan, and that's my hometown. But it's been a real opportunity over the years to not only share with people like yourselves here at the St. Francis Yacht Club. By the way, I understand you're number one yacht club in the whole world. Is that right? Yeah. I know this is streamed live, so I'm sure there's somebody probably hollering out over the airwaves about how could he say that. But that's Ron told me that, so I believe it. So. But nonetheless, again, certainly in a role as a supervisor to deal with local issues, as Kathy said, everything from law enforcement to human services to animal care and street maintenance and a whole host of things, public infrastructure, but certainly water being a predominant element, certainly in recent years for our counties, but I think for the state of California. And one of the things today that we'll touch on is just to give a little bit of background on kind of where we've been certainly over the last 10 years. And Kathy and I are part of a group of county representatives, our fellow supervisors from 3 other counties, from the counties of Yolo, Solano, and Contra Costa, joined San Joaquin and Sacramento in the Delta Counties Coalition. And we actually came together about 10 years ago now, and have had great staff support from our 5 respective counties, because as I said, in local government, you're dealing with a whole lot of issues that are day-to-day issues, and yet you're trying to engage at a policy level and at a governance level with folks on a statewide basis, maybe even more broadly than that, but certainly with issues of water. They pertain not only to our region of the state, obviously the Delta, Bay Delta, but certainly to Northern California and Southern and Central California as well. But our coalition was formed as a kind of a precursor to what was then before the legislature, that's now 10 years since it was passed, and that was the Delta Reform Act, which the legislature was considering at the time. And as a part of that, looking at governance as it related from the state and local perspective, but also then water policy. And I'll just note, and Kathy's going to highlight some of this too, that as a part of that legislation, there was a co-equal goals, as they were known. And the statement is that in order to achieve water supply reliability and ecosystem restoration, that certain things had to happen by statute, including obviously elements that pertain to all of California. But out of that, the county coalition, the 5 counties who have representation on the Delta Protection Commission, there's a seat that's designated on the Delta Stewardship Council, which was new to the legislation, and then the Delta Conservancy, of which Kathy served as our chair right up until last week. But that was governance, but still the policy background, this goes to today's topic. Part of that, all wound together in that legislation, was what was then known as the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. Then the successor to that was the California WaterFix and the twin tunnels, basically. And so embedded in the legislation was a pathway in the event that they could meet certain environmental thresholds that would allow that conservation plan, which, believe it or not, as a conservation plan, the primary element was to do conveyance to the delta, basically the twin tunnels, or something akin to that. And I know there were folks in the audience. I spoke with someone before lunch that talked about, going back to the peripheral canal, back in the late 70s, early 80s, and the alignment was fairly parallel, although not exactly parallel. And yet, I think what was really important out of that legislation is that we as the counties came together and certainly joined with others, certainly from the standpoint of the environment, of the fisheries, of the recreation, whether it's boating or other recreational aspects, agriculture, certainly in this region of the state, and really have formed a strong partnership. And so let me kind of stop with that. Let Kathy kind of fill in some of it. We'll kind of tag team this a little bit today. So, Kathy.
Thank you. I want to stress how important this coalition is and how unique it is. The strategy has always been on these sort of big grabs is peel people off and give them a little bit of what they want, and then they'll abandon everybody else. And what the 5 Delta counties did was we came together and we identified that we do have some different priorities based on our geography and on our population. But we have far more in common than we have differences. And we all shared this tremendous threat. And so the decision was made at the elected level, and I was not a supervisor then, so my hat is off to Don and my predecessors on my board. The decision was made at the policy level that we were going to set aside our differences and we were going to focus on defeating this single threat, and we would not be separated. We were going to hold together as a coalition, and we were going to speak with one voice, and we were going to direct our resources in the same general direction, and we were going to advocate with a single message. And we have hung together over a decade. And I truly believe it's the main reason why there are no tunnels under construction today. It really is. We've directed a huge amount of resources, financial resources, all of our counties. There's been a lot of litigation, and frankly, our litigators have been better than theirs, which is really why we've been able to stop it. We've thwarted them at almost every step along the way. And a big part of that is because we have right on our side. And they're really trying to skirt a lot of not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of the laws and the clear message that the people of California have sent to our state has been that this environment is precious. It's unique to California. In fact, it's unique to the Americas. And Californians are not willing to put it in jeopardy. It was a very clear vote back in the early 80s against the peripheral canals. That's why tunnels didn't go to a vote, because clearly the sense was it'll fail again. People will probably by an even larger margin when you think of what's happened environmentally worldwide and how much consciousness has been raised about it. And so I think really to the credit of all 5 of the counties, we have really hung in there. We have staffed all the meetings. We have spoken at length multiple times. We testify in all the committee meetings. We go up to that Delta Stewardship Council where we only have one vote, and we still go up and routinely, and we make sure that the information is out there. And we have formed some non-traditional partnerships to expand our coalition. A huge one has been with the environmental community. Typically, ag and environmentalists, those aren't two groups that you see together. In my county, we also, as part of our county coalition, we included the Port of Stockton. We included a large business contingency. We included the development community. They understand that to shut this down, it's the end for all of our economies up here. And so it's been very effective. We listen with respect to our different groups. And while, again, sometimes we may have a slightly different priority that we're advocating for, we've really acknowledged that we have far more in common, and that this great estuary has got to be preserved, not just for us and not just for our economy, but for the future of our state and for our kids and our grandkids. So that's really what's carried us through.
If I just could add to that, because I think Kathy really framed it correctly, that part of the legislation that I referenced, and I think it actually provided us a foundational point, at least in the discussions over the last 10 years regarding the twin tunnels, is that legislation, those co-equal goals, it had a very important qualifier. It said that those co-equal goals, the water supply reliability and the ecosystem restoration, had to be done in a way that protected and preserved the unique values of the Delta, the recreational values, the habitat values, the agricultural, cultural, historical values of the Delta, the San Joaquin, Sacramento Delta, as an evolving place. And I think, the legislation, as much as it may have provided a pathway for a conveyance project, potentially, it also talked to those values, and it called out for a reduced reliance on the Delta. And we've used that point many times because it goes to the whole point of water transfer, of water conveyance. And we understand that the fresh water that moves through, that obviously ends up in the bay, and as Ron pointed out, certainly as part of the tidal influences and the back and forth of the mixing of the fresh and salt water, and that's about as much as I know about the biology. But I know that it's unique, and as Kathy said, on the west coast of the Americas, this is unique. It's a place of wonder and awe, and again, it's an opportunity for us as Californians, certainly recognizing the essential element that water is to life as we know it, and whether it's the economy or it's our daily lives and all aspects, that we don't have to sacrifice the Delta and the Bay in order to have, again, thriving, robust economic development and pursuits elsewhere in California. And that has been part of the challenge because, again, there was a tremendous, I think, focus, and continues to be some focus, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, on basically water transfer. And we've tried to, again, in our work, certainly over the last few years, as we've, kind of zeroed in on the damage that the twin tunnels would bring to the Delta, both in the construction phase, but long term. And it goes to certainly the water quality impacts, the fisheries, the recreational aspects, agriculture, because again, if you get more salt water in different concentrations, that affects agriculture, certainly in our two respective counties, but in all of the 5 counties. And so I think with that in mind, we've taken the tack that, yes, we were against the twin tunnels. We know that conveyance is important because obviously there's a dependency that's built into everyday life of moving fresh water through the Delta in a certain proportion. And that's another thing we've questioned is that, what is the right amount? Now, and if you gathered people from different regions of the state, different experts, they tell you different things, but we believe there needs to be some determination around what's sustainable, and recognizing that, some of that water will pass through and it'll be taken off, but we currently use a through Delta approach. And even though that's been given, a short shrift in some cases because of people's, expressing concerns about sea level rise, about seismic activity and such. We believe that if we invest in the levees and then in infrastructure elsewhere, that we have real opportunity as a state to have regional sustainability and self-sufficiency and do it smartly. And so I'm going to turn back to Kathy to talk about some of those alternatives.
So one of our key points has been the tunnels don't create any new water, not a drop. All they do is move water differently. And our state has a water supply issue. More waterfalls in the north, more people are in the south. So we have to solve for that. And we don't believe it should be only solved by looking at the Delta. And I think there's some really outstanding examples right now in Southern California of some investments that are reaping huge returns. San Diego County has invested heavily in desalination, and they have almost effectively weaned themselves from the need for imported Delta water. Orange County has invested in treated wastewater, and they are recharging their aquifer. So they cover storage without building any above ground storage and none of those environmental impacts. They're recharging with highly treated wastewater. So it's sort of the ultimate closed circuit, closed loop recycling. Los Angeles County, one of the most visionary investments in stormwater capture in the world. They are actually investing in unpaving some of their riverbeds so that in certain places where they know that there's good percolation, so that when they have huge rainwater surges, the stormwater can recharge their aquifer. Conservation is reaping huge rewards all over the world, but especially in Southern California. So our belief is conveyance should be the last piece of the puzzle, but it always gets talked about first. Like we have to start here with the assumption that we will have to continue exporting the same amount of water from the Delta. We don't believe that's the case, and that there has not been enough careful analysis of regional projects, many of which are already teed up all across this state and are just waiting for funding. How much actual new water would they generate? And then what's the net shortfall for our state? Because until we know that, how can we make a decision as to the size of a conveyance, where it should be located, how it should be operated? And it's a huge investment in dollars, a conveyance system. The last thing we want to do is invest too much money in it, make it too big to a level we don't need, and then siphon off dollars for a lot of these other regional plans. So we believe and have been advocating strongly for the last 10 years that there are smarter investments to be made. It's not an unlimited pot of money that people in this state can afford. We need to be smart with those dollars, and we need to have realistic cost-benefit analyses done of these projects and figure out where's our best return on investment, where will we generate the largest increase to our water supply, and then we talk about how do we get this new water where it needs to go.
Yeah, and okay, just a couple minutes here. So let me just say that one of the aspects too, and it's something that I think has helped us in our discussion, certainly in our testimony and in our representation on behalf of the people, the 4 million residents, certainly of the 5 Delta counties, but obviously what we believe more broadly, certainly Northern California, obviously including folks in the Bay Area, and we have some strong alliances here as well. It goes to the people. And when you look at what the Twin Tunnels proposed, and again, we still have similar reservations as they look at an alternative. And again, we want to certainly thank Governor Newsom for basically taking California WaterFix off of the docket and saying that, you know, he wanted to look at a single tunnel alternative and to look at that, to Kathy's point, more deeply as it relates to certainly the various impacts, not only of construction, but of some of the things that she just described. But I want to just, and we're going to close with a video clip here and then take some questions, but talk to just a moment for the people. In the Delta, in the primary and secondary zones of the Delta, there's about 500,000 people. I mean, if you take that, you know, compared to statewide, where we're approaching 40 million people, it's a sizable population, but yet we recognize it's dwarfed by those folks that are dependent upon the Delta. And yet we have a way of life there. Many of you know it because obviously your island is in the Delta in San Joaquin County, but many of you, certainly through your boating and other travels, have, you know, traveled either by water or by land through there. And we have 6th and 7th generation farmers. We have the recreational investments, some who are in the audience today who have marinas and other operations there and supportive services. And it really is. It's unique. I characterize it as a place of wonder and awe. And with that, though, the daily life. And so we have folks who've invested for generations there, and what the construction would pose, at least under the previous proposal, was, in my view, a devastation, a degradation, and probably an elimination of a way of life. It would disrupt agriculture. The construction period was anywhere from 10 to 15 years, hundreds of truck trips per hour, you know, round the clock in some cases. The 3 inlets that were proposed were in Sacramento County, the area just south of Freeport down to just south of Cortland, those areas there. And what we would see, though, is a tremendous, you know, impact, negative impact. And so I often say, and my colleagues do too, that, you know, we don't believe, and I don't think anyone should subscribe to, that somehow that region, which again connects with this region and is an important element in California's overall you know, water network, shouldn't be just a plumbing fixture that can be sacrificed for the benefit of others. That we need to, going back to what Kathy said, is to work to find solutions that really do bring us water sources that are reliable, that are sustainable, that are environmentally friendly, and that are supportive of the activities. And whether it's when you look out the window there in the bay or upstream in the Delta, from the Sierras to the sea, and the watersheds up above, right to the ocean front. And so, again, that's been our journey. We continue to you know, work together. And again, we've along the way had many you know, good alliances and continue to do that. And again, we're hopeful that the governor and the new administration will take a serious look, working with all of us as Californians, to find solutions that really do fit the 21st century. So with that, we have a short video clip, and then we'll take some questions, Ron. So, but she can run for president. I'll be the VP. Thank you. That's very kind.
Thank you.
Ron, if you want to just bring it up on the screen, and we'll just, this is about a 2-minute video and kind of goes to the people. Okay, it says Ron's back. Okay, go ahead. I've got it.
Yeah, it's
Your screen's
timed us out.
Yeah. Sorry.
No worries, buddy.
Here we go.
There we go. All set to go here, mate. Max, bring it up on the screen. Here we go.
The Delta is it's just a very unique place.
Well, it's home. Yeah, I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
Well, Delta means home. Delta means kind of the center of California. Delta means, you know, recreation, employment, heritage, responsibility, all kind of rolled into one.
You know, I remember when I used to go to college and bring some of my buddies back here on the weekends. You know, they were actually mystified about, you know, how it was with all the rivers and the waterways and the trees overhanging, and, you know, we used to water ski and, you know, do a lot of that stuff. It's just, you know, it's very unique.
We're just going to end up being a sterile water facility for the state of California.
You know, it's the largest estuary on the West Coast, if not the United States, and you know, basically needs to be let alone.
Now we've got this this tunnel project knocking on our back door, and I'm not quite sure that the architects of this grand scheme know what the heck they're doing.
It will definitely affect farming and the quality of water that goes through the Delta rivers and channels.
The Delta is this treasure of California that not many people know about.
A lot of fourth and fifth generation families here go off to college, come back because they like it so much. But it's a very, very tightly knit community.
Besides, it's the taking of the land, it's the disruption of the whole delta, and this will never be the same.
If you didn't have the local, gossip and get together, it just wouldn't be the same.
Oh, we can shut it off now. That's a plug. This was used for another talk. I would just say that the folks you saw there in the video, and I know you may be acquainted with it. Mark Scribner has Scribner Bend, which is just south of Freeport, longtime farming family. The Hamleys, Doug and Kathy, who have a beautiful home and certainly a multi-generational farming operation there, Green and Hamley, right just north of Cortland. And then Mark Marias, who has Juicy's restaurant, and maybe some of you have patronized the Juicy's over the time. But again, that's reflective of throughout the Delta, whatever county you're in, and whether you're in north, central, or south portions of Delta. Those are the people who live, work, and make the Delta what it is, and make it enjoyable for all of us who don't live there to be able to visit and be a part of that. So I want to thank you for your attention. I want to thank Don Thomas very quickly, because he and Ron and whoever did the audio visual, this was a last minute addition, but we really appreciate that. So I guess we're going to take some questions now, Ron. So thanks so much. Okay.
You have to go down and over. They're going to bookend me with their navy blue. we look very patriotic, right? Right? Cool. Yeah.
Yes. Max, middle mic. Okay. So, right off the bat, tell us what's the twin tunnels died. What's happening with other tunnel threats?
Well, Governor Newsom has said he pressed the pause button. That was the phrase he used on the twin tunnels, and that but he's moving forward with exploring a single tunnel. The devil's in the details. One tunnel, is it going to be just as big as the two combined? How will it be operated? Our hesitation on operation has been consistently, none of our counties have a meaningful role in how any of these projects will be operated. And yet all of the negatives are on us. City of Stockton, in the middle of bankruptcy, invested over $200 million in a water treatment plant. First time they've ever pulled drinking water directly from the Delta. It's about 5 miles south of where the new intakes would be. So their cost of treating that water, because the quality will go way down, you've just imposed a huge burden on the taxpayers and folks in the city of Stockton, in a city where a huge percentage is considered a disadvantaged community. I mean, we have a very low median income and a lot of families struggling. You don't get a choice on your water rates. If the water has to be treated more and your water rates go up, you have to pay it. You don't. That's not a discretionary expenditure for your family. So we have a lot of concerns.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on that to say that I'm still very skeptical because, again, they're going to do a deeper look, and we're very appreciative of that. But I think the impacts that come with not just construction, but long-term operation, and the point's been made here a couple of times this afternoon that, the devil's in details, because, again, how you design something and build it operationally, what does that mean? And I would just say I subscribe to a very strong belief, personal as well as obviously positional, as it relates to my representation at local level, the county government, is that that ought to be the last conversation. We have a Delta in which, even under their proposals, they would still use through Delta conveyance at the time of the twin tunnels 60% of the time. So you need to make the investment in the levees, which not only provide for the water conveyance, but also, protect the lands and obviously the people and the investments behind that. And so it just seems to me that we spend so much time looking at the focus on conveyance when we ought to really turn our attention to those things that we know can and will make a difference. And we have projects that are ready to actually, could be built with the right amount of cooperation and certainly the financial support behind it. So I think that we're hopeful. And I would just last note would just say that when Governor Newsom in the first breath said that he was going to pull California WaterFix, he didn't support the twin tunnels. And then obviously in the next breath said that he was going to pursue a single tunnel alternative. There's a lot of work behind that, and we hope to continue to be a strong voice for our communities and for the Delta.
Okay, quick question now. Just give us a short bullet points. Who are the players? That is to say, who wants to not have tunnels? Who wants to save the Delta? And then who are the players who want to get water from the Delta?
Well, those of us who are opposing it would be the local government of all 5 of the Delta counties, as well as several other Northern California counties. The environmental community, Restore the Delta, is a very strong partner with us. Sierra Club has also come out very strongly in opposition. The folks that want it.
Wait, what about farmers?
Oh yeah, we have in that coalition. We have huge support from the ag community who see their way of life just disappearing. Boating, recreation, all of the and all the people that live in the Delta. There's a lot of water agencies in this region that pull drinking water for their residents from the Delta. So there are a lot of people that are not in support of this at all. I'm going to let Don talk about the evil empire.
Who wants our water?
Okay, well, I just say, and we actually have some allies too, both in Central and Southern California, who I think, to Kathy's point earlier, that recognize that the Delta can only sustain so much of the burden, and that their regional self-sufficiency with those investments would put them in a much better position in their own respective regions, and not necessarily have all the dollars go to a mega project. I mean, the project was, under their best estimates at the time, was somewhere close to $20 billion, just a little less than that. Our estimates were, by the time they were done with cost overruns and delays on projects of that sort, and the fact it was going to be 10 or 15 years before it was completed, that it would be closer to $50 billion. Again, people could argue about that. As far as those who have been supportive, a number of large water agencies, obviously Metropolitan Water District of Southern California.
Wait, when you say obviously, so for us here, when you say the Metropolitan Water District of Los Angeles, give as specific as you can.
Southern California.
Give us some bullet points. Okay, they want our water. Okay, who else?
Well, and there's a number of state water contractors that, to the point, that actually use the state system. The Santa Clara Valley Water District is another one that relies heavily, and again, understandably, they have a good portion of their water supply, fresh water supply.
Who else wants their water?
There are Westlands Water in the Central Valley. There are a number of agricultural districts. Again, the cost, as we understand it, was obviously more than some of those agricultural users could bear, but nonetheless, they're a part of a coalition of folks. And then there are a number of agencies that Metropolitan Water District supplies to, both in the eastern and western portions of the counties surrounding Los Angeles. In fact, that's pretty identifiable. You can see who at public hearings testify in support of or in opposition to. But largely folks that are dependent. I was just say they are dependent in part or in greater part on Delta water as a part of their supply. And the numbers used, about 25 million Californians in one way or another are dependent upon water that flows through the Delta. And so again, it's not just those agencies, but obviously they have constituencies that they deliver water to, whether at the retail level or the wholesale level.
Okay, now we're going to ask for questions from the audience, the first of which is from our Commodore Paul Heineken. Commodore Heineken.
You mentioned the agreement 10 years ago, and that developed or committed to sustainability of the environment. the environment was also already seriously degraded by the second major water project, and the San Joaquin River right now is not much of anything but a drain until you get almost out to the Delta area. What's the sort of time zero of talking about sustainability and environmental protection that agreement alluded to? And is there any, plan going forward to improve the San Joaquin environment?
Well, there was a settlement for the San Joaquin to restore the San Joaquin River, and it has been constantly under attack. Part of our concern with operation of any of this is that during the drought, there's very clear requirements that, first of all, the water only goes, so they have junior water rights. They only have a right to surplus water. That's it. Point of origin gets water first. And there's a certain water quality standard that must be met in the Delta for them to pump. During the drought, what happened was, because of intense political pressure, and there's a lot of money at stake here, what happens is they relax the standards. And so even when there's clearly not any surplus water, and when the water quality is being highly degraded, they have continued to pump our water south. And that's part of why we're so concerned that nobody from our part of the state is ever involved in making those decisions. So when they say, oh, well, it'll be only operated at certain times, we have a lot of skepticism about those statements, because frankly, they have not lived up to the promises in the past, and they have constantly tried to undermine even the legal settlements which have required some remediation. For the most part, they've tried to undermine at the federal level as well. There's a huge amount of money being spent in Washington, D.C. to get the federal government to weigh in, and the president has attempted to make sure more water will get pumped south.
I would just say too, not so much on the San Joaquin, but I think Commodore, your question kind of goes to some of the complexity of water policy and all the various layers, and many of you have followed this for decades, and we talk about an aspect of it here that's obviously very relevant, very current, but it is compounded by not only certainly water rights and allocations and who's paid for what and who's paying for what. You could have a full conversation about Orville and about the condition of the aqueduct currently, and what about storage, and all the opportunities that either present themselves as potentials, but then also the challenges of a system. And I would just say one other thing to the point here, and maybe it goes to our rivers, which are our natural conduits for water, but those things which we've constructed as a part of the water project that has fed obviously the economy, supported agriculture. So the need to make the investment there, and we continue to echo this, and I think as Californians to invest in our infrastructure, because some of that is failing us, and we need to look at what we have and get that in good condition, just as we talk about our roads and other things. And so it is complicated. I'm not a water expert, but beyond the politics, there's just the practicalities of it too, and we all need water to survive. So Ron, I'll turn it back to you.
So we have a next question from Kim Dessenberg.
Hi, I just wanted to thank both of you for your successful work in helping to stop this double canal project. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Kim, and thanks to all of you. Because again, there are folks throughout California that speak to their elected representatives, they speak to their chambers of commerce, to their own organizations, and so I think that round of applause ought to go to folks in this room as well. Because again, sure, you have a great knowledge, you have a great interest, and I think as Californians, we can certainly do well to continue to stay engaged and to seek solutions that are ones that are going to benefit all of us if at all possible.
Okay, and Kathy, I think you said you didn't take credit for the bankruptcy of your city. Is that correct?
No, only for the rescue. I wasn't elected when the decisions were made that actually led to it.
Okay. And more seriously, I'm hoping that there will be a scientific study of what the minimal flow is. I think there was a reference to that. And I hope that that will be used as a bare minimum and not as an opening argument for negotiations of how we can reduce that so everyone else gets some. It seems like it should have the unimpeded flow from some date in history, whatever you choose, should be the entering part, and then this would be the minimal part, so that people can see that we are already doing our share.
That's certainly what we're pushing for, what we're advocating for. The other part of the puzzle, and we won't go into all of it, but the way we're getting our water is different. We used to rely so heavily on the snowpack, and the times of the year when we got water and the way we got it, it's changing. We're getting these huge atmospheric rivers, these massive storms, and so we're getting huge, flows at different times of the year. So all of those things have to be part of this. As Don said, it's complicated.
Another question from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
Terry Watt, what a pleasure to hear you both.
Thank you.
So just yesterday, there was the legislature put up a possible solution to another big challenge of our times, high-speed rail. And it involved exactly what you touched on and might pose another solution, which is to take all of those billions and instead give them to the urban areas to solve the transportation problem where it's most acute, and later go back and see if we need to connect us up. You touched on the possibility that maybe the billions for the tunnel could instead go to a broader coalition looking at what the data really tells us. Where's the water coming from? Where's it needed? And what could we be doing to your San Diego, Orange County, funding that infrastructure first?
It's a great idea, and that's pretty much the gist of what we've been advocating for, is let's make smarter investments.
And thank you for those comments, Terry. And I would just say that that is, I think, the approach, looking at the regions of the state, recognize we're one California, but how do we best invest dollars that I think really continue to make the payoff one that is long-term sustainable. So again, thanks for your comments, and that's a good example.
So some data points. Give us a sense about the size of the Delta. You said 500,000 people live there. What do you consider the eastern border, the western border, and preliminarily the northern and the southern borders of what you call the Delta?
There's a legal definition of Delta in law, and certainly in this Delta Reform Act, it included the Sassoon Marsh. And I didn't mention earlier, but the National Heritage Area, which we are the first one in California to have a designation. It includes portions of the bay. It comes into the Carquinez Straits to have a National Heritage Area, recognizing the treasure that the Delta and the bay environs, at least the eastern part of the bay, are to California, but to the nation. But there are about 735,000 acres in the Delta, and it goes as far north as Freeport in West Sacramento, easterly to about Highway 99. Obviously, the influences, though, Ron, it's fed by the Sierras, and when we're recognizing the connectivity, and then it ends up in the bay. And then I think the southern area, you can kind of tell us.
Well, the southern area pretty much comes down along to the Stanislaus River.
Give us a city name.
County line of San Joaquin County, so it would be just south of Manteca and then run over to Tracy. So kind of comes up a little bit up above Tracy, but it's a very large area.
And how far west do you consider to be Delta before it becomes something else? Where is it? Carquinez Straits?
Well, the National Heritage Area took it to Carquinez Straits, but by definition, it would come as certainly includes those 5 counties. Actually, just a tad bit of Alameda County in the Delta, a very small portion. And they now include the Sassoon Marsh, which is largely encompassed in Solano and Yolo counties. But it's where you have the tidal influences, in the riverine system, as well as obviously in the portions of the estuary.
So we've read that, tell us if this is the case, that Southern California interests, quote, water interests, have been buying property in the Delta so that they can have the right to vote on water issues. Give us a short answer. Is that happening? Did that happen? What's going on with that?
Short answer is yes. Metropolitan Water Agency has bought three, isn't it, of the large islands, and
Bought the whole island.
Whole island, yeah. And so there's a lot of speculation as to why. It's not just about voting, because money buys an awful lot of influence, but there's been a lot of speculation as to why and what their plans are for that. And so we're monitoring it. We're trying to keep tabs on it. We're trying to work in a positive way with Metropolitan as much as possible to make sure that they understand the implications of being owner.
Another question from the floor, Staff Commodore Bruce Monroe.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for illuminating us. As you can probably tell, we're all big Delta fans around here. But my question is this. I've never really understood the argument in favor of these tunnels, because whatever water is pumped out of the Delta has to go through the aqueduct to Southern California. That aqueduct can only carry so much water. You can see the aqueduct clearly when you drive by, which we do quite often. It always seems pretty full to me. It doesn't seem to me like that aqueduct could take a whole lot more water. So what's the sense of building a big pumping facility when you essentially have a bottleneck there with the aqueduct? Can that aqueduct take a whole lot more water?
Ron from counsel is here on short answers. Again, not an expert, but we know there's been some subsidence with the aqueduct, and so some of the ability to actually move water. I think that water is generally moving, even though it looks like a static body of water. But we've argued for a long time, I think, right, that because take this, take it at the times of the years when it would have less impact upon fisheries or such, that in 2011, December 2011, when we had of the start of the drought, they had to shut their pumps down because they couldn't take any more water. And so we believe storage is key, and whether it's underground or above ground storage, having that capacity to take it, assuming some still going to flow through the Delta. But I think you kind of summed up the argument. We believe that investment could be far better put to developing some of the strategies that actually help you retain the water, whether it's in the immediate watersheds or in the upper watersheds or somewhere online. And so I'll turn to Kathy.
I think one of the key components you're hitting on is if the stated goal is not to take more water, because only so much can come out of the Delta, and we know that. It's already critically overdrafted, and it's got a lot of water quality issues. So then what's the reason for the tunnels, right? Well, a big part of it is the new intakes, the new location. They're not going to pump it from the South Delta after it's flowed through the Delta and the Delta itself has reaped the benefit of the water. They're going to take the colder, cleaner water directly off the Sacramento River. And that's the water that the Delta will no longer receive, and will no longer flush, and it will no longer help the fisheries. It's not just about the cleanliness of the water, it's also the temperature of the water. And so our belief is simply moving the intakes will have a tremendously negative impact on the Delta itself.
It gets to my next question. So as a young kid in the Delta, before the first peripheral canals, the Delta was much cleaner, or so it seemed to us then. People swam in it all the time. Everybody swam in it. And then after the peripheral canals, and remember there was one and then a second, there's multiple peripheral canals. If you fly up in the valley, you'll see there's like 5 of them right next to each other within a couple of mile wide range. So what about the toxic blooms that we saw in the 70s and late 70s and 80s? They never happened before. Is there a relationship between the quality of water in the Delta now and the fact that we've been shipping water out of the Delta and bypassing the Delta to send it to Southern California?
Well, we believe there's a direct correlation in terms of the amount of water that's been pumped and the water quality that's left in the Delta.
Because certainly agribusiness has more effluence than ever, it seems, flowing out. Is that true? Because they're constantly farming, so we have less fresh water and we have more essentially agri runoff in the Delta. And is that what's causing the blooms?
You know, I don't know for certain, but I can tell you between invasive species and obviously water that, you know, may have a warmer temperature or you know, different constituents in it that, you know, contribute to blooms. But, you know, obviously within our systems, even with better wastewater treatment, certainly runoff, tailwater, and water is along the Sacramento-San Joaquin. It's picked off the river, it's used, some of it gets back in the river, and it's used multiple times. And so I think there's probably a combination of things, but over time, you know, again, with population growth, obviously with, you know, the extraction of certain amounts of water from the Delta, different flow regimes coming out of the mountains, to Kathy's point, Ron, where we depended upon that snowpack as the storage, and you had colder flows. Now we're seeing that, you know, earlier in the year. So there's a combination of things. I think to the point made earlier about, you know, studying it, and there's a lot of attention focused on the Delta because we need to understand what's going on.
So tell us, how much water, what's the net amount of water that Southern California needs? Do we have any numbers around that?
It depends who you ask. If you ask
that's why I'm asking you.
It feels to us like there's an unlimited need from their standpoint.
That's why I'm asking the question.
I would talk to the folks in Owens Valley, talk to the folks that used to live around Tulare Lake, and they'll let you know what's the bottom of the amount of water that some folks would be willing to take.
So we're not the only region in the country, in fact, even in the world, that needs water. We're seeing needs in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. And instead of spending $20 billion on one giant tunnel instead of two, what about using that money to refine, you know, solar-based desalination or reclamation activities so that we essentially pioneer the technology that we can then, you know, in the good American California way, sell that technology around the world and essentially contribute to a solution, not a band-aid to the problem. What about that solution?
You're preaching to the choir. Those are some of the projects that we've been advocating for. I think you can look to Israel. Some of the stuff Australia did in the wake, Singapore, yes, in the wake of their droughts. You know, you can't just lift another part of the world's system here because we have a different set of water rights laws and those sort of things. You have to work within your own legal parameters, and each nation has its own system. But within that system, the technology is just improving, just leaps and bounds. And things that even 5 years ago were not cost effective, they are going to be cost effective in the very, very near future. And we're California. We should be taking the lead on that. I agree with you. We pioneer technologies here in this state, and that's exactly what I believe we ought to be doing.
Ron, I just want to say I agree with you. Maybe we'll put you on the presidential ticket. That's a good idea. But I just wanted to say that, you know, we've said this. I think I even said it today that, you know, we think that the tunnels is a 20th century solution for a 21st century challenge. That one we ought to be able to, just as you stated and others here, that we ought to, you know, look to the future. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you for joining the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Our guests today have been Kathy Miller, Supervisor of San Joaquin County, and Don Nottoli, Supervisor in Sacramento County. We are very happy to have you with us. And with that, the luncheon is adjourned.
Thank you so much.